All right, everybody, we're gonna start in just a couple of minutes. Feel free to grab food in the hallway. And yeah, we'll come back in just a couple minutes.
The next question is, I need to know what your favorite so like when Amy I got it. You're like, well, we're going this way. So I guess she didn't want to call out to the. Yes.
Yep. Testing. I'll try. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Please take your seats. We're going to get started in a minute here. Feel free to grab a seat, any seat that's open. We'll be moving around during the workshop, so. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Go ahead and take a seat, and we're kicking off now. There's some open seats over in the corner over here. Right next to Mark too, he's pointing. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see all of you here for CWCB's West Slope Climate and Water Workshop. Whether you've traveled near or far, we appreciate you joining us to engage in some critical discussions on Colorado's climate and water future today. I'm Kat Weissmiller. I'm the section chief for water supply planning at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And on behalf of CWCB and our sister agencies from the state, many of whom are here today, and our colleagues from CSU and Linker who helped us plan this event, I want to extend a warm welcome and thank you for being here. So what is today about? Well, we've organized these workshops with the support of several state agencies, including CDPHE, DOLA, CDA, CPW, DHSEM, and the Colorado Energy Office, and you'll have a chance to hear from all of them today. Today's a special opportunity to connect with state and local experts, decision makers, and peers to discuss solutions for building resilience and to learn about the resources available to you and your organizations to help you prepare. Today's event also helps us advance the Colorado Water Plan, which calls for hosting workshops on climate vulnerability, adaptation, and resilience. So here we are today. So who's in the room? We're joined by a diverse group of water professionals, conservation groups, local governments, and community organizations. And I'm going to quickly ask for you to raise your hands if you're from a watershed or conservation group. Awesome, thank you. A water provider or water utility? Fantastic. Local and county governments? Great, thank you. State agencies, public institutions? Fantastic. And then community organizations? Great. Well, I encourage you all to be present and fully engaged in today's discussions. Don't hesitate to ask questions. This is an opportunity to connect, share ideas, and learn about the resources and tools available to you. So introduce yourself to someone new, ask questions, and think about how today's conversations can help you shape your approach to climate and water resilience. We have a full day ahead, so let's get started, and I'm going to hand this over to Emily Adrid.
Thank you, Kat. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to CWCB's Climate and Water Workshop. My name is Emily Adrid, and I am the Water Planning and Climate Impact Specialist on Kat's team at CWCB. I just want to say thank you again for making your way down here to Clifton. I know some of you traveled far to get here. So on behalf of CWCB and CSU and our liquor team, we appreciate you all being here. We also appreciate your interest in the topic that's brought us together today, climate and water. I think we can all agree that water is incredibly important for our way of life here in Colorado. It supports our towns, cities, and industries. It breathes life into our forests and natural landscapes. It sustains agriculture both economically and culturally. And we know that climate change is altering our relationship with water and the way that we manage it. And because we know that temperatures have risen and will continue to rise, wildfires and droughts and other hazards will continue to impact communities across our state. We know that we face complex challenges ahead. So today we are going to grapple a little bit with these complex challenges and work together to strategize on how we might approach these challenges, both in the short and long term, so that we understand, what we're doing that works well, and also maybe some gaps in the things that we want to explore. So to start, I want to highlight the impetus for putting on these workshops. It starts with the Colorado Water Plan, which was updated in 2023. So the water plan outlines 50 actions that CWCB, our agency, will take over the course of the next 8 years to support the advancement of a more water resilient future in Colorado. One of the actions in the plan is action 4.5 displayed up here. Action 4.5 states that CWCB will convene 2 workshops related to water and climate vulnerability, adaptation, and resilience. And I know the text is really small, so to summarize this language, we know that climate change impacts communities unevenly, and working with our state agency partners, it's important to identify and support those communities that are either more exposed or more vulnerable to climate change. The action states that during these workshops, CWCB will facilitate a tabletop exercise to better understand the ways in which communities experience climate impacts unevenly. And finally, it states that the feedback and discussions from the workshop will help inform a forthcoming climate impacts report that CWCB, CSU, and Linker have been working on for a little while now. I'll talk a little bit more about the report later on this afternoon. And I think this sets us up nicely for our agenda today. First, we're going to hear from multiple state agencies about their climate and or water related resources, tools, and funding opportunities. I've listed the acronyms for each of the agencies on the slide here. We'll go into a little break where you can, if something, if one of the agencies says something that you're interested in, we'll have a break so you can talk with them and get more info. And then finally, we will get into our tabletop exercise and simulation. So just a little bit more details about the presentations. We're going to have 2 rounds. The first round will include CDA, DHSEM, and CDPHE. We'll pause for a quick Q&A for those agencies. Then we'll get into round 2. We have DOLA, the Energy Office, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and then CWCB. So without further ado, I will ask Kristen from CDA to come up. Yeah, of course. Yeah, there you go. Right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out today. My name is Kristen Boyson, and I work for the Colorado Department of Agriculture. I run our Drought and Climate Resilience Office. I'm based over in Broomfield in the Denver area, but one of our offices is up the road here in Palisade. We have our insectary there, which is probably the coolest program we have, but I'm no expert, so I'll point you in the right direction if you have a question about pests. I do run, like I said, our Drought and Climate Resilience Office. ADCRO is our acronym. We have acronyms for everything. And then we kind of look over three different things: soil and land, energy, climate, and drought. And today I'm going to talk about our grant programs in each of these categories. Our biggest program is our soil health program, which works with local implementing partners like conservation districts to help farmers and ranchers do soil health practices on their operation. As of this year, we've had nearly 400 producers enrolled in this program. I will note our federal funding for this program was cut last week, which is a big bummer, but we're going to persevere. So stay tuned for what our new program looks like once we figure out what to do without our USDA funding. However, we do have a brand new program that won't take the place of the soil health program, but will complement it, our new stewardship tax credit. This is a new tax credit for farmers and ranchers, so tell all your friends, starting in 2026, they can get up to $300,000 to implement stewardship practices on their operation. This can't overlap with existing grants, but it doesn't have to be new practices either. So a lot of folks have been early adopters who have been doing no-till or pollinator planting or conservation cover for years and years, and they can finally get some public funds to help them out, help them keep going. Next, I'll talk about our energy programs. We have 3 big energy programs. Our oldest is Acre 3, stands for Advancing Colorado's Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And this is a grant for on-farm, on-ranch renewable energy or energy efficiency. The application is currently open, so come talk to us at our booth and we can get you set up with the application form. It's a pretty easy application. And then we get people set up with energy audits or feasibility studies for their projects. We also help folks apply for USDA's partner program, which is called REAP, Rural Energy for America. It's a similar program to our Acre 3 program, but worse to apply for. So we'll help you apply. Let us know if you're looking for money, and they have the federal government has more funding than we do. So if you have a bigger project, REAP might be a better fit. And finally, we have a grant program about research and demonstration of agrivoltaics. Agrivoltaics is when you farm or graze underneath solar panels. And CDA really likes this idea because you get multiple benefits from the same parcel of land. So you can both do energy production and keep that working land working. This grant program is also currently open. And like I said, really targets demonstration projects and research of agrivoltaics. And then finally, kind of in our climate and drought sphere, another grant also currently open. It's like I timed all of this terribly. These are climate resilience grants, again, targeted at farmers and ranchers who have experienced a climate-related disaster or are at risk. This year, we're focusing on the big three disasters: wildfire, snow events, and drought. So again, tell your producer friends if they're looking to build their operation back stronger so that it can withstand these climate disasters, which are going to get worse and going to get more frequent. We'd love to help them out. And was my whirlwind speech. Again, my name is Kristen, and I'll be here all day. Who's next?
DHSCM.
Yes.
Yes.
That's our name.
I misread the order.
No worries.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mark Thompson, the State Hazard Mitigation Officer with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Let's see, that's two mouthfuls. So you can just call me the Schmo, please not the Schmuck. My acronym is bad enough already, and it's nice to see so many folks out here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at DHSCM to fund hazard mitigation activities across the state, and how you can use that to address water. We deal primarily with flooding, but we're also looking for ways to help address drought. And to some degree, we're sort of limited right now with climate change. So the first part of what we do across the state is we facilitate the state government's hazard mitigation plan. Working with almost every state agency, we address all of the natural hazard risks in Colorado to first address the risk to state-owned and leased assets, which could be buildings, could be highways. We try and disregard CDOT sand sheds beside the road because it's sand. We can always go right outside Alamosa and get more. And then we also help counties across the state have their local hazard mitigation plans where they do the same thing with risk assessments down to a granular level, to the point of looking at how many homes, for example, are exposed to the 100-year flood, or how many homes are in a high to low wildfire risk area. And then these plans make communities eligible for the mitigation grant funding that we facilitate at DHSCM. The eligible participants in these plans are any local government in the state of Colorado within that particular county's boundaries, to include conservation districts, water sanitation districts, school districts, and our most frequent special district partner, fire protection districts. So these opportunities are available again to any local government that chooses to fully participate, and then they become eligible to apply directly to us at DHSCM for the project grants without having to go through the city or county on the way. It becomes a direct relationship with us. These are the natural hazards that we addressed in the 2023 update. You can see by the color coding there, we have three hazards we consider universal and extremely high: fire, flood, and drought. And then a number of hazards ranging from high to moderate to low, based on the risk to state-owned assets as well as risk to personal property and local government assets across the state. The items with the single asterisk have a direct impact on them from climate change, and it's never for the better. And then the ones with a double asterisk have an indirect change or impact from climate change moving forward. Because the funding that we facilitate is federal, we are not really in the climate change adaptation business for the next few years. But the reality is there's enough risk as we know it today to still make these projects and activities worthwhile. And another reality is it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly how climate change will make something worse at a particular spot on the ground. If you are already highly prone to flooding or wildfire, and I tell you that climate change is going to make that worse, that's probably not going to motivate you anymore because underwater is underwater, on fire is on fire. There's enough risk now to still be able to tap into these particular funds. So let's talk briefly about our history here in Colorado. As you can see, we have funded over 200 projects across the state. These are generally at a 75-25% cost share. For wildfire projects, we do have some funding available to help meet some of the match on that. And then there's also a subset in a recently impacted community from fire to do things to address the post-fire flooding that will happen. We are always looking to put new thumbtacks in new places on our map. As you can see, there aren't a ton on the western slope, but Mesa County is one of our most frequent partners with respect to flood mitigation. In fact, I think we have 2 projects going in Mesa County now. Say that? They're probably overlapping. But no, we are well aware of our fond relationship with Mesa County. Are you, Carrie? It's nice to finally meet you. She normally gets the luxury of dealing with Debbie, Julie, or Emily, but she's stuck with me today. So some of the things that we can do, I talked briefly about mitigation planning across the state. What I've highlighted in blue are the project types that are specific to either flooding or drought. So we've got scoping projects, which is one of the ones underway here. We can do property buyouts, which are not extremely popular in Colorado, but they are available. Elevating structures above the floodplain, flood proofing of non-homes, fire and post-fire mitigation. And then the main area where FEMA funding is impacting drought for the better is aquifer restoration projects. There have been 2 awarded to date. One was in Puerto Rico. The more recent one was in Provo, Utah, which is underway. Water experts, you know this, I may be the dumbest person in the room about water law, but you do need a confined aquifer to recharge it, because why do you want to pay for that and then just share it with Utah? And you need the water rights to restore your aquifer to begin with. But other than that, it's certainly available and something we would like to take on here in Colorado. And that concludes my presentation, and I will be followed by, well, I do have Matt here with me. If you joined us in Pueblo, you had the opportunity to meet Emily, but she's here in spirit. And I will hand you over to CDPHE.
Here. I'm Ronnie Kumar. I am with the Office of Environmental Justice. I'm the geospatial or GIS analyst for that office. I do not particularly work in water, but our office works across all divisions from CDPHE. And I have coworkers here from the Air Quality Pollution Control Division. And then I don't know if Blake is in the room. I actually haven't met Blake, but he is our Water Quality Control Division representative who will be at the table for the rest of this afternoon. So I'm going to broadly talk about our climate resources and just wanted to back up with who CDPHE is. Obviously, we have the 2 keywords, public health and environment. So on the public health side, we do everything from environmental public health tracking, hospital inspections, regulating milk. On the environment side, we have our environmental divisions that regulate and monitor both water. We have the Water Quality Control Division, air, and then our hazardous waste management division. So takeaway from all this is that we're a very big entity. We have a lot of resources, and if something is not on here or a contact that you would like to have that is not represented today, please let us know. We can help you get into the right space with our state agency. And so giving some very broad climate resources, I'm standing in for our climate and health team out of our Healthiest Community Prevention Services Division. But essentially, they're a team that works on built environment topics and specifically dedicated to climate change. So they work across all these different sectors, topic areas, specifically can connect to water through, how all these things are interconnected. But what they really do is offer technical assistance. So they're here to be supportive for folks who are applying for grants, help do data resource sharing, consulting on general projects. So that unit, I can give this to people afterwards too, but Tori Bloom's not here today, but she's the climate and health coordinator and wanted to share this resource out with you all to get technical support from their office. Again, not water, but from our APCD, there's a lot of work happening on climate, specifically in the regulatory side, but also in some funding opportunity sides and how they work through emissions. So feel free to ask Courtney or Bree if you have further air questions. And then for our office out of CDPHE, the Office of Environmental Justice, again, we work broadly across all divisions, but we have our Environmental Justice Advisory Board, which is a governor-appointed board of 12 representatives from across the state. So they meet and can consult on various EJ topics. We have specialists in community engagement. We also have our Environmental Justice Grants Program. So that is, the cycle has finished for this year, but they're going to be next year in 2026 opening again. But I did really want to highlight the supplemental environmental projects, which some of you might be familiar with. But I just actually inspired by, I know it's not FEMA, but the prior division's presentation, I opened up our dashboard to see where these supplemental environmental projects are. And we really don't have many on the western slope. It's primarily Denver and Will County. But SEPs, as we call them, are when a regulated entity has an enforcement action against them, so essentially a fine. They can use that money to directly fund a community project. So it doesn't have to have a specific tie to sort of any type of project. It has to be community-led and community-driven. But if you have regulated entities in your communities, which we all know, permits for water, hazardous waste, and air throughout Colorado. So that's one way to get more funding directly back into the community. And sometimes it can be fairly big pots of money that these fines they're enforcing. And then lastly, my area of work are on these environmental justice mapping tools. We have the disproportionately impacted communities definition, which is a statutory definition that we map for the state. And we also run Colorado EnviroScreen, which is our state's environmental justice mapping tool that pulls together 35 different data sets related to environmental health, climate, and population characteristics. So all of our data is up and you can use that to help write grants, learn more about your community. We have 4 climate variables in that tool, including flood, drought, extreme heat, and wildfire risk. So I can talk to you more about those tools. And then also at the Water Quality Control Division table, we have more information on the SEPs and other projects. So I'll end there and look forward to future conversations.
All right, so I'll ask Kristen and Mark to just step up in case anybody has any questions. Now's the time. Feel free to raise your hand or.
Yeah.
So the supplemental environmental projects, so in the past, we've actually received solutions. And we used to kind of catalog shovel-ready projects that SCPs could run. Are you guys still doing that? Are you cataloging those? Or do you want an organization like us to provide projects that you're aware of? How is that working these days?
Yeah, so perfect question. We have a SEPs idea library that you can submit through our website, but I can put you directly in contact with Alex Shear, who's our manager for that program. And I guess when I looked at my dashboard, that was the last 5 years of projects. So we have a data visualization that shows where our projects are. So there probably have been historically other projects in this area, but in the last 5 years, none recently. So yeah, I think it can work a variety of ways. I think one of the best ways it can work is that community comes in with like project ideas so that when there is a find that it can like flow together pretty quickly and have an established project. So yeah, so I can show you the SEP idea library and exactly kind of work either way with groups collaborating together. I don't believe it has to only be like county level or local gov. I think it can also be nonprofits that can work on this together. Yeah.
Thanks, Frank, for the question. So we, there's a lot of federal funding out in the world, and certainly the CDA gets a lot of federal funding. This specific grant I mentioned was a grant we won in 2022 called Climate Smart Commodities. And that was $25 million to the state of Colorado to do soil health implementation of farmers and ranchers, research across the state and really across the West, and also market development for climate smart practices. And the new administration canceled that grant, so all of the grantees were told that we don't get more money. So that's too bad. We thought we would have 3 more years to do that work. With grants canceled, there is another grant that may or may not work for us. You know, there are no details yet, but we're pivoting at the secretary level for this team.
I'm Natasha, and to follow up to that, in general, what's the percentage of federal funding that each of your organization is getting, which is at risk?
I don't really answer that for Colorado Department of Ag. We do get a fair amount of funding, although I wouldn't say it's the majority of our funding. And I think it's program by program, whether some of it is going on. No problem.
So there's not a fixed percentage. My slide had 3 columns of programs. 3 weeks ago, I had 4 columns. One of them has been eliminated, one of them has been frozen. But the money from post-disaster mitigation grants is still coming. In fact, FEMA informed us today to expect our next reward for a new project next week. And we're starting to hear rumors that the program that was canceled 3 weeks ago is going to be replaced either with the program it replaced or with a version that doesn't focus on climate change. And so it really is on a project by project basis. So, you know, here in Mesa County, for example, we're hoping that the new program gets up and running quickly because we have been working with the Colbrand Conservancy District to mitigate some of their critical agriculture ditches and water providing ditches for this.
And I might, because I cannot answer for all of CDPG, so sorry for the flash there, but CDPG covers a breadth of topics. And so specifically, you know, public health has been taking some hits with, you know, just generally sort of the direction of Health and Human Services and where the CDC is going. So I'm not on the public health side of CDPG and I can't specifically speak to that, but I do know that this is probably going to be an interesting year for that side. And I think some programs, not divisions or offices, but some programs will likely lose staff and funding. And then for each of the environmental divisions, so we have air, water, and hazardous waste, there's a different mix of funding for each of those. I think you know, our office, the Office of Environmental Justice, is state funded. I think air also has more state fundings. I know the Water Quality Control Division is primarily federally funded. So it's going to look pretty different across different spots of CDPG.
Your question, okay.
No, his table name was pointing that out.
Oh, I see.
Partner, not the, but. I use the microphone as the guy that pointed at you.
So with respect to this as well, outside of funding grants, you have some specific examples of successes of agriculture that they're operating in the state with respect to those next programs.
Great question. There's a couple great demonstration projects, but they're mostly on the other side of the hill. And there's one in Longmont, one in Fort Collins. And those really, their whole deal is that they're a demonstration. So they like do a lot of outreach events and a lot of education and policy work. We really hope at CBA to get real producers who are doing real agriculture to test this out. And it's a big lift, which is why we have a grant program about it. But I will say here in Palisades, CWCB is doing some work over both grapes and peaches. And like those projects will be up and running, I think next year. Yes. So I think we're getting more and more examples, but it's not widespread by any means. And people are hitting different hurdles and figuring out different ways around those hurdles, and we really hope to share those success stories. But if you're ever out in Longmont, check out the giant solar garden or up at CSU, there are giant facility.
See both of those, those sort of things, would apply to CSU and Conservation County land use, because those programs will have to be permitted within the program. But I'm wondering if there is an opportunity with CDA to partner with Mason County with respect to some programs that we've got applications for, how they can forward that are 5 megawatts and larger. So here's an opportunity to kind of get on the ground and help us out at the county level.
Yeah, we'd love to talk. We don't have very much funding, so I'm not sure how much we can help with more than 5 megawatts, but we can help a little bit. And love to talk. Yeah, thanks.
Any more questions? All right, Retta.
Hi. With the ag climate resilience grants, have you gotten any questions about like how eligibility goes with FSA programs that might cover similar issues like forage loss due to climate?
Yeah, great question. We've been working with FSA to make sure we're very clear on how those two things overlap. We certainly don't want people to apply for one funding and have it then make them eligible for funding they need in the future. So FSA does a lot of recovery right after disasters. That's great, and that's not really what our grant is. Our grant is not immediate recovery, but instead like resilience. Instead, how do you make your operation stronger for the next time around? So for us, doesn't matter to us if you get FSA recovery money. FSA wants to make sure they're not paying for the same thing twice. Totally makes sense. But I think because of kind of the time stagger and that FSA comes in pretty shortly after the disaster and we have an annual grant cycle, we're not in kind of the response period. It won't be too much trouble, but we're gonna be super clear about that to our grantees about how those things are running.
Seeing no other questions, so thank you all. And we will move on to next agency, which is DOLA.
All right, can everyone see me over this podium? Maybe I should move over here. Hi, everyone. I'm Shayla Sabo. I'm with the Colorado Resiliency Office within the Department of Local Affairs, and really excited to be here with you all today to talk a little bit more about what we do. So our office was established in 2013, really following the large-scale response and recovery that we saw to the 2012 wildfire season, which I know we were just talking about what March was like that year earlier. And the large-scale flooding that we saw across the state in 2013. And so when we first were established, we really had kind of a long-term recovery focus when it came to how we integrated resiliency. And since then, we were actually moved into the Department of Local Affairs in 2018 because of our focus on not only the state agency integration, but with our focus on supporting local communities and integrating resiliency at the local level. Our approach to resilience is really looking at how do we reduce vulnerabilities from a holistic perspective across state agencies, but also across community sectors, and really working together collaboratively to address changing conditions in the future, and looking at how we can have strategies that are long-term and adaptable to changing conditions. One thing that I really wanted to talk to you all about today is that we are in the process of updating our Colorado Resiliency Framework. So this is updated every 5 years. So our first framework was established in 2015, again, having that longer term recovery focus following the floods and the fires. It was updated again in 2020, despite kind of the challenges of the pandemic. And we find ourselves again in a state of uncertainty and disruption with a lot of the things that are happening with federal policy shifts and whatnot. So hopefully in 5 more years, we'll just be like, easy. There's nothing going on, knock on wood, when we update this again. One thing I really wanted to point out is kind of our framework graphic here. So as you can see, again, we take a cross-sector approach to resilience, but overarching all of our strategies is this perspective of the impacts of climate change, just because we recognize that climate is a force multiplier for a lot of the shocks and stresses that we see in the community. So everything that we do is kind of run through this lens of understanding the long-term impacts that come with climate change. And then you'll see on the screen as well, we do have some North Stars in that whatever we do with this next framework, it must drive systems levels change. It must be informed by both local and state priorities, prioritize equitable pathways and outcomes. We also have 9 identified resiliency criteria that help to ensure that we're making long-term sustainable investments, that the programs that we support are looking at the changing conditions of the future. So really incorporating that criteria into our strategy development. And then of course, anything that we're looking at should go not only within the next 5 years, but far into the future. And again, integrating those climate-related impacts. So this list up here, I'm not going to read it one by one, but this is kind of our initial list of key areas of impacts or key vulnerabilities that we've identified across the state, working with our state agency subject matter experts, what we're hearing at the local level, as areas where resiliency intervention can make a substantial outcome. So looking at some of the things that we've talked a lot about already today, such as flooding, fire, and drought, but also looking at those areas where it really does take true collective action to be able to achieve any sort of success. So we know things like critical infrastructure or addressing the housing crisis, or addressing the long-term impacts that will come from funding challenges does require all hands on deck. It's not just something that one agency can really solve. And that's really the intention of our framework, is not to duplicate what is already being done, such as the wonderful Colorado Water Plan, but how so does the Colorado Water Plan integrate into the work that we're doing as a collective action group. So we're just kind of getting started with this process. We are currently developing our outreach and engagement plan, where we'll be hosting several in-person and virtual roundtable and summit events throughout the summer and the early fall. We are just in the process of actually getting our consulting firm onboarded now. But if you use our website or sign up for our newsletter, you'll be able to stay up to date on a lot of the events that we have planned. And then we're looking at releasing this framework in early 2026. So just shifting gears a little bit, one of the things that I also want to share with you all is a tool that was recently released by our office, which is called the Guidance for Local Government Climate Adaptation. So this is really modeled after New York Climate Smart Communities. But what this is it provides right now 28 actions that could continue to grow across these 5 sectors. And the idea is that this guidance is guidance that can continue to evolve over time as we gain new information, as we gain new data, that sort of thing. And this guidance provides actionable solutions that local governments are able to take to better address climate impacts. So there'll be a plan, assessment, something that you can readily implement depending on kind of your capacity or your needs or what the opportunities are at the local level. And so these are available on our website. And again, it's an interagency approach. So a lot of the folks that are involved in the framework also contributed to this guidance. And it does provide a lot of resources and information that folks can utilize to really just take action right away. Some additional tools that I wanted to mention that our office provides is our toolkit. So we have both a readiness and resilience toolkit, as well as a post-disaster recovery toolkit. So this walks you through all the phases of a disaster and what things that you might need to plan for or what resources are available. And these are also regularly updated with new information. The Department of Local Affairs also manages a local community funding guide, which a lot of folks at the local level may already be familiar with. And so that's updated regularly with state and federal funding opportunities pertinent to local governments. And then we also have our planning for hazards tool and website. So this is really looking at how can you utilize land use planning strategies to reduce vulnerabilities to natural hazards. And then just really quickly, I wanted to mention a colleague of ours in the Colorado Development Office, which is also within the Department of Local Affairs, also oversees a lot of tools and resources for water planning and land use integration. So I don't have a slide for it, unfortunately, but there are a lot of resources available on our website, including self-assessments and guidebooks, as well as best practices and land use planning resources for that. All right, and I think that's everything for our pitch field as well.
All right, next we have Colorado Energy Office.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ari Moladina, and I'm a program manager with Colorado Energy Office. Really excited to be here today. So I'll be talking about the Energy Office and giving kind of a specific dive into a grant program that we have launching this June called the Local Impact Accelerator. So to give a high-level overview of the Energy Office, our goal is to create a prosperous, clean energy future for Colorado. So our goals are to help reduce emissions to become net zero by 2050 and help reduce air pollution and energy costs for all Coloradans. So we have a number of programs. I don't have time to speak to all of them today, but some of them include incentives for electric vehicles, charging, e-bikes, home efficiency and electrification. We have an income qualified solar program, which is going to be opening later this year called Solar for All. We have lots of programming for workforce development and upskilling, and then building energy efficiency opportunities. So to give a little bit more information about the Impact Accelerator, this was awarded via a federal grant that we got last summer through the EPA. And about $50 million of this will go to local governments, and this is going to fund policy and project work in 4 different categories. Unfortunately, none of these have to do with water, but here are the 4 categories. We have building decarbonization, land use, transportation, and then waste solutions. So we're anticipating awards for about 20 to 50 jurisdictions, might be more than this. And we're going to be awarding policy awards up to $200,000 and then project awards up to $1.8 million. And there's 2 ways to apply for this program. The focus is really on creating long-term policy impacts that'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we're really focusing on that policy adoption piece. So you can apply for a policy adoption grant or policy adoption with implementation project funding. So that means that you cannot apply for just an implementation project. And again, this is really to help create these long-term permanent policy changes in local governments and kind of offering that implementation project funding as motivation. So we will be kind of building in steps within the scope of work to kind of incentivize folks to complete actions towards policy adoption. And then that will kind of help push them further along in their scopes of work to unlock that project funding. And we'll be releasing detailed program guidance on June 2nd. The program is going to open for its first round June 16th. So we'll have a lot more information on the policies that you can apply for and eligible project types come June 2nd. And then this is just an overview of the timeline for the accelerator. So we are going to have 2 different grant rounds. One is opening in mid-June and the other in October. And local jurisdictions will be required to submit letters of intent that kind of explain what their grant proposal will be and offer kind of a 50% application effort. And then we'll have time, our office will be able to provide feedback in order to allow folks to kind of update their applications before the full application round. And I have lots more information on all the programs we offer and some handouts as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to come talk to me.
All right,
everybody. I think I'm the last one, maybe, we'll see. Angela Vogue, I'm the Climate Resiliency Policy Lead with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about something called the regional partnerships, which some of you may be very familiar with, others not so much. But I just wanted to highlight that Tori Minogue, who's not here today, is our Western Slope Regional Partnership Coordinator. And so I'm happy to pass along her contact info if that's something any of you are engaged in. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we are your state wildlife and parks agency. Our mission is to perpetuate wildlife resources in the state and provide a quality state park system to provide enjoyable and sustainable outdoor recreation opportunities that educate and inspire current and future generations to serve as active stewards of Colorado's natural resources. So I like having that future generations piece in there because there are lots of ways that climate change impacts our agency, and I'll speak to many of those today. But it's something we're thinking increasingly about. So obviously we do a lot of work. We manage 43 state parks, over 960 wildlife species in our state. We have over 350 state wildlife areas and divide the state into 4 regions that we manage. So we, as you all probably know, we do everything from issuing hunting and fishing licenses to providing funding to protect high priority habitat and other key ecosystems, and providing technical assistance to local governments and landowners around everything from land use planning, that impacts wildlife and habitat, to, providing funding to build new trails, etc. So what do I do? Well, my job is really to ensure we're integrating climate considerations into all of our statewide planning and budgeting decisions. There are a few sort of statewide documents that really guide my work. One is the Colorado Climate Preparedness Roadmap that came out a couple years ago now from the governor's office. We also obviously work on recreation, so the new statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan has some climate considerations in there. And then right now we're working on our 10-year update of our state wildlife action plan and really trying to think about how our changing climate is impacting the species that we recognize as conservation priorities, as well as their habitats. So we have a lot of grants at CPW, and I'll list some of them at the end, but we almost had too many for me to focus on any one today. So instead, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what keeps me up at night, because I think you may have some sort of parallel concerns in your community that I'm happy to chat about, throughout the rest of this afternoon. So what am I worried about? Increasingly frequent heat waves, those obviously impact our communities, but from CPW's perspective, they're impacting wildlife as well as opportunities for recreation. If you need climate data to really drill down and say, well, what are the changes impacting my community? I highly recommend the Climate Change in Colorado report that came out last year, another product of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and it has some awesome climate projections and summaries in there. Another way extreme heat is impacting our communities is it can drive increased visitation to mountain communities, cooler parts of our state, potentially increasing conflicts between wildlife and recreation. I'm also worried about our contracting winter seasons in many parts of the state, right? But even more so because it's actually happening faster in some other parts of the country. And so it may mean that we see changing pressures on our winter rec just from folks who are coming from, say, the coasts where their ski seasons are becoming even shorter. So another challenge that we're going to have to work through as we think about managing, wildlife and recreation going forward. Obviously, that declining snowpack, big impacts on water availability and flows, thinking about changes in shoulder season recreation and that potentially expanding earlier in the spring and later in the fall with warmer temperatures. And then higher wildfire risk as well. Obviously, that's come up lots of times today, but from a recreation perspective, many of your communities are probably dealing with this all the time. How do you manage for potentially more frequent fire bans, or just increasing operational resources to deal with locating, illegal campfires and other potential wildfire sources? So a couple things that CPW is doing that may inspire you if you're working at the local level. We are planning a climate vulnerability assessment for our state parks and state wildlife areas to really ask what is that most vulnerable infrastructure and those key operations that may be impacted. And then also, as I said, considering, climate in our state wildlife action plan and how can we really support species as they also adapt to this, changing environment. Something that was announced today, and you'll probably see in the news, is Colorado's new outdoor strategy. This is a statewide visioning document that really sets some visionary goals statewide about how to balance recreation and conservation in the state, integrating concepts around climate resilience. So I encourage you to check that out. And really in service of that outdoor strategy, as I said at the top of this call or of this presentation, is the Regional Partnership Initiative. So this is a new-ish program with CPW. It's really modeled off of the Basin Roundtables, if folks are familiar with those. We're really looking to support local collaborative planning groups that are working to balance conservation and recreation in their communities. And we provide funding to help them develop those plans. So if you don't know about your local RPI, come ask me about it. I don't know if we're missing one in Mesa. County, we might be, so we should talk to Tori about that. And then just in terms of funding opportunities, again, I don't have time to go into them all today. But if you work on conservation or recreation, we have funding opportunities for you, whether it's state trails grants or conservation easement funding, wetlands grants, even for increasing access, fishing is fun grants, and even human wildlife conflict mitigation, like our human bear conflict reduction grants. We have a lot. So come chat with me, and thanks so much for the time today.
I am going to give the final presentation for CWCB, and then we'll head into a break. So our agency, CWCB, we have several grant and loan programs. I will only be highlighting 3 today: the water plan grants, water supply reserve fund grants, and the water project loans. So the water plan grants are funded to support the implementation of the Colorado Water Plan. I mentioned the water plan earlier, but it really is our agency's guiding policy document that sets the vision for our state's water future. So the projects that we fund fall into these 5 categories: water storage and supply, conservation and land use, engagement and innovation, agriculture, and watershed health and recreation. And preference for the projects that we fund is given to projects with multiple benefits, multiple purposes, and multiple stakeholders. And it's not listed on the slide, but the application deadlines for these grants are July 1st and December 1st every year. Next, we have our Water Supply Reserve Funds, or WSRF grants. This program provides funding to assist Colorado water users in addressing their critical water supply issues and interests. What's unique about this program is that requests for WSRF funds must be approved first by at least one of Colorado's 9 basin roundtables, which are pictured on the screens. If approved through the roundtables, the request is then forwarded to CWCB to make the final funding decision. And those who aren't familiar with the Basin Roundtables, they're a body of local water leaders and experts that were created by legislation. And the goal is to have the roundtables work directly with CWCB so that we can help fund and elevate the issues and just have a better understanding of the local issues in each basin. So they serve as a forum to really facilitate discussion at the local level. that can again be elevated to state partners, including CWCB. So the water project loans, this program provides low interest loans for more construction projects and design projects and rehabilitation projects for water storage and delivery. The image on the screen is a photo of the Arkansas Valley Conduit, which was partially funded through the CWCB loan program. And when it's done, it will provide drinking water to tens of thousands of people in the Arkansas Valley. So these are some additional funding programs that we have. We have our PEPO, which is Public Education Participation and Outreach Grants, turf replacement grants. We have our Ag Emergency Drought Response Grants, and then our Wildfire Ready Watersheds program. And if any of these programs catch your attention, feel free to head to our booth, and we have staff here as well to answer any questions. I'll just highlight 3 resources today. The first we have is Wildfire Ready Watersheds, which really has 3 main focuses. The first is a statewide susceptibility analysis that investigates the susceptibility of life, safety, infrastructure, and water supplies to post-wildfire impacts, including sedimentation or flooding. The second element of Wildfire Ready Watersheds is really collaborating with communities on local wildfire ready watershed action plans. And then this program provides funding for those action plans. And then the third element is implementing the strategies in the local action plans. Next, we have the Climate Change in Colorado report, which was mentioned before, and there's one copy on every table today. This report examines the climate and hydrologic trends we're seeing in our state, along with the projections for our future. It does a really great job of laying out the state of the physical science of climate change in our state in a really digestible way, I think. And then the third report, or the third resource here, is the forthcoming climate impacts report, which is related to the Climate Change in Colorado report. The forthcoming report, though, examines how these climate trends and projections are impacting communities in our state, which can include how communities might be exposed or vulnerable to climate hazards, and how they are currently adapting or taking action to prepare and be more resilient to these climate hazards that we're facing. So the activity that we are going to do for the rest of our time together will really help inform the climate impacts report. So I will pause there, I guess. And I will ask the presenters to come up again. And if there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Thank you. Do you have any projections or empirical data on what some of these grants or some of these programs are either initially stage or in the stage of homeowners or installers?
That's great. Yeah. I would say one of the best resources to refer to is the greenhouse gas roadmap, which we just released the 2.0 version of it earlier this year, not by outlines. The 1.0 version outlines all the actions that we committed to taking, and then 2.0 kind of updates what we achieved, which was most of those targets, and then targets for the next 5 to 10 years. Are you talking about specifically like savings for homeowners specifically? Yeah. Okay.
The programs are designed to save homeowners money. So I'm curious if you've got an idea of projection of what that might be, or some empirical data that says the programs that work really well, we say on average, homeowners have been participating.
Yeah, for sure. And I should just say, we have a number of programs. So we do have programs for residents, but we do also have programs for businesses, for utilities, for industry, for local governments and tribes. That's the savings per homeowner would vary depending on the program. So we'll have solar programs, we have heat pump tax credits, and weatherization programs as well. So we certainly have the data. I don't think I have it off the top of my head, but I think we can actively kind of figure out which program wants to use the savings for.
Yes.
This question is for Marguerite, who made the presentation about the watersheds and natural resources. But maybe I got the name wrong, I'm sorry.
We switched last minute.
I was just wondering, I live in Rifle, and I was just wondering what kind of watershed projects have been done here on the western slope under your program.
So as far as watershed projects, I think what DOLA has really done traditionally is more so fund like watershed coalitions for restoration and recovery projects. So that being said, it's not really within the Colorado Resiliency Office's purview. So I don't have that, sorry, with the information off the top of my head, what's been done specifically here, but I would be happy to connect with our regional manager and provide that information after the fact.
Do you have solar programs specifically for nonprofit owned commercial buildings?
No, unfortunately, the main solar program that we have is gonna be our Solar for All program, which is gonna be focused on low income communities, and we'll have a residential multifamily and then community solar component of that program. So we don't have any, focus on that, unfortunately. The biggest thing I would point you to is probably just, making sure you're taking, advantage of, direct pay, that tax credit benefit. So I'm happy to talk to you more about that if it's helpful.
I get another question for you. The grants for the solar panels and all of that, are those reliant on federal funding as well? And maybe you have some uncertainty attached to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Solar for All is a federally funded program, as is the one that I did, the accelerator program. I feel like we can't guarantee anything, obviously, with the state of things. However, as of now, our funding is flowing and is fine. And for, in communication with EPA, things did get turned off for, I think, 2 weeks, and has been on since then and no issues. So we're moving forward business as usual, but yeah, obviously, no guarantees.
For the local accelerator grant, you mentioned on stages, for policy adoption and implementation. Can you give some insight on like what those stages are? Is that include stakeholder engagement at early stages all the way through like incentives for adoption later on? Can you talk about?
Yeah, for sure. So grantees will receive one award, right? So if you receive a grant for policy and project funding, you'll get that all at once. Policy grants are mostly going to be for technical assistance, stakeholder engagement, anything that you would kind of need to get you to the place where that policy would be adopted. The other thing we're going to be asking for is some sort of local buy-in, so a letter from city council or an elected body or something of the sort to kind of prove intent or desire to explore and adopt a policy. The stage gates might look like, okay, in your scope of work, have you, written it, we want to meet with council 2 times, if you've done your best to do that. And then once you kind of achieve those milestones, your project fund would be unlocked. So we're not, you know, it's obviously passing policy is hard and not guaranteed, so we're not going to say you can't unlock project funding unless you pass policy, but we do want to see that you kind of upheld the commitments to what you said you would do in the policy adoption. So, does that make sense? Okay.
Great. Seeing no other questions, so I think we can take a quick break. And so it's 2:11 right now. Why don't we come back around 2:20? Feel free to grab food, ask questions at the booths. And we'll see you back here in just a few minutes.